Right. All right. Welcome to the first CPS Policy Committee meeting, Policy and Equity Committee meeting of 2024. It's awesome to be here. Sorry for the late start. As always, we're going to do a quick round of introductions, beginning with the man behind the curtain.
Rob Wilson, technician.
Kendra Matt, board member.
So happy to have Ken here. Mike Morosky, board member.
Ben Lindy, board member.
Jan Hoying, general counsel.
Stephanie Scott, assistant general counsel.
Chris Burkhardt, Chief Operating Officer.
Emily Bell.
Awesome. Thank you for everybody for being here. And then the young person next to me who's now on the floor is James, and he's going to be my sidekick today. So we're going to dive right into the agenda. And Target is a wonderful tool to use. So the first thing we're going to do, I was going to delay this, but since Mr. Lindy is remote, and we can still delay it, of course, but I was going to delay the election of the chair since Mr. Lindy, I didn't think was going to be here till later, but he is here, and I just wanted to know if he had any interest. I have interest in remaining chair, but I wanted to make sure if you had interest, Mr. Lindy, then we'll delay the election of a chair.
Oh, that's very thoughtful, Mr. Morosky. I think you make an excellent policy committee chair.
That means a lot, very much. Thank you. Ms. Mapp, would you like to be chair?
I think that I agree with board member Lindy's recommendation for you to be the chair.
No. Okay, well then I will entertain a motion for a committee chair. Does anyone have a nominee?
Ms. Mapp, I would love to make this motion, but I can't because I'm remote, so I will leave this to you. I'm not allowed to vote on it either, but it has my emotional and moral support. How's that?
Thank you. So I move to nominate board member Morosky to be the Policy and Equity Committee chair.
Well, thank you. And I will second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, Ms. Mapp and Mr. Lindy. I am honored to serve once again as chair. And for those watching, it's a good lesson in the public political process that might have looked and seemed a little strange, but that's what happens when you do everything in public. So thank you all very much. The next order of business is the committee meeting schedule, which, excuse me, at our very first organizational meeting, I remember I ran over to chat to the two members. I'm happy to have Mr. Lindy back on policy committee. The second time we've worked together on this committee. The first time, if I may, quick point of privilege, Mr. Lindy led a pretty impressive process regarding responsible bidder and making sure that we were contracting in a state like Ohio that hates organized labor and people who work for a living, because we're not allowed to have responsible bidder laws in a public school district. And so anyway, when Mr. Lindy, we did a lot of cool things that year, but one of the things I think was the biggest was that effort that he led to get us to a point to have policies that were legal and also make sure that we were taking care of workers. Yeah.
For the historical record, my understanding is Ohio prohibits prevailing wage with school districts.
Prevailing wage.
Responsible bidders.
That's right.
Which is why we did it that way.
And it went really well. Thank you, Ben. And Ms. Mapp, it's good to have you on here in your first year on the school board. All right, so back to the committee meeting schedule. We had just talked briefly, the committee members and me, about keeping the same cadence. And I'd said something to general counsel about this as well, and that cadence, with a slight change, the cadence would be the third Friday of the month, but instead of 9 to 10:30, 9:30 to 11. So I'm going to ask Mr. Lindy first. Does that sound right to you?
Can you just say one more time, Mr. Morosky?
Third Friday of the month, 9:30 to 11.
I think that sounds fine. We just set finance, and that's not the same time as finance, Mike.
Is it? 10 o'clock on the third Friday. Yeah. Okay. Does that work for you? It does.
I'm fine with
fine.
a different at like
Okay.
the second Friday or at the
Okay.
30 time.
Maybe this second Friday, so that would be like February 9th, March 8th. Okay. How does it still have to be 9:30 for both of y'all? For you? Okay.
We'll say so the 9th. Thank you. For the February 9th date, I won't be available, but that the second Friday of the month does work from that 9:30 to 11 time frame.
Okay. And I can already tell that one might not work here, and we'll figure it out as we go along. But is that all right if we set that for now then? We'll do second Friday, 9:30 to 11?
Yes,
Yeah.
it works.
Thank you very
Cool. All right. Second Friday, 9:30 to 11. And so then we'll get those calendar invites from board staff. Thank you, Ms. Davis and Ms. Bruckner, for that. So be sure to accept those invites. And then one of the first things we have to do as a committee, and every committee has to do this, and we don't really have anything in front of us now, is to set our 2024 work plan. I don't have any intention of voting on anything today, but just to sort of put pretty much, right? And then we've gone through every year since I've been here and been chair, and before that, we've gone through all of our policies kind of by category, the audits, for lack of a better term, to just clean them up. There's a lot of duplicative things. I think we completed that for the most part, but we probably have a new cycle every 4 years we're supposed to look at them. Is that right?
Yeah, so the policies are divided by sort of chapters into the first chapter is the bylaws that relates to the board's sort of organization and conduct within itself. Really, that's really board work more than administrative work. And then it goes from there to policies that impact employees, administration, students, the community, finance, property, and they're all kind of divided into chapters. We have, having staffed the policy committee for some time, there are some years where the policy committee, I think, very methodically goes through, and does 5 to 10 policies a week where they're looking and reviewing, and sometimes it's no update, and sometimes it's substantial revision, but kind of from beginning to end. There are other years like last year where almost the entire year was sort of dominated by the work the board did on the bylaws, and we didn't go through. So, if we were going to go back to sort of looking through policies, I think we are nearly finished reviewing the employment policies. One of the things we did there is the policies used to be divided by certificated staff and civil service, and we are all but about 5 or 6 away from combining those all together, which I think was the policies committee's preference. And then from there, we could look at students again, we could look at administration. So, whatever the will of the committee is, we'll be responsive to that. But those, I think, are the ones that would be next up in terms of reviewing.
Comments from?
Thank you for providing that context. I think it was really helpful. In terms of the things that can be considered, are we able to go in a little bit further and do a deeper dive of some of those outstanding areas within employment or the student perspective around policy and administration, just so we can get an idea of maybe where to focus first?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, there are times when I think the policy committee has kind of its some areas that it wants to focus on. There are times when the board assigns the policy committee to review policies. So really, whatever the will of the committee is what we'll look at.
Yeah, I think, starting with a basic where we need to go back, like students, admin, wherever it makes sense to go back and start looking at them again, we can do that. And that's kind of the easier part. And then the more difficult part or more interesting part at times is, like to Mr. Hoying's point, sometimes something will come up and we'll invent policies, like with the anti-racism policy. That was not on the agenda, and COVID was going on and George Floyd, and the country was on fire, and we decided it was important to respond. Today we see House Bill 68. We have Mr. Heckman here with the climate resolution that was assigned to us, for example. But Mr. Lindy, do you have any response to what Mr. Hoying said, or any preference for work plan aside from diving back into just the standard sort of rotation with students and students and admin?
Those are probably the ones that would be next up.
Okay. Well, Mr. Lindy, comments?
One thing that I would love to see us take on this year is looking at our conflict of interests policy as a board. I think that a lot. I'm thinking about our work with the council, and one of the things that when we do those self-assessments, I can't remember which category it's in, but the good version of the answer is the board has a conflict of interest policy that everybody has to sign every year. And then there's I think another provision in the rubric about how we there's something about voting. I have to look it up, but I think looking at how we do our conflict of interests policy and what we require board members to sign and vote on every year would be something I'd be interested in.
Okay, so we can add that conflict of interest, students and admin, excuse me. And then the only other thing I wanted to add, and I'm glad I remembered this, was I know that, and this was inspired by Mr. Lindy speaking actually, because it reminded me when he was here, he also asked for us to do like an audit of a few policies. And so we picked 3 sweeping policies that seemingly touched every part of the district, like the equity policy. And this was very difficult, and we asked our internal auditor and her team to audit these policies, and it went okay. And that's not a commentary on the internal auditor's team or us or anything. It was really hard. And so one thing that, not to speak for him, but Mr. Lindy talked about a lot when he was on this committee, and it stuck in my craw, was that we have these great policies. Some of them have procedures on the administrative level. Some don't. Some of those procedures make it to the school building. Some don't. What exactly is going on with our policies? And the way I understand it from the superintendent, and again, not to speak on her behalf, but since she isn't here, they've done this. And they have gone through and said, these policies have procedures, these don't. I would love that massive, gnarly list to be on our work plan. And I said something to the superintendent about this, like that would be a wonderful use, I think, of our time in this committee, right, to work with administration and say, you've all done this. I certainly don't know. I know what these things say. Does that make sense, Ms. Mapp and Mr. Lindy? Would that be something worth?
It makes absolute sense, and I appreciate that you have brought that up, because we do know that at times there can be dissonance between what our policy says and what is actually happening in practice. And so thank you for providing that reminder to all of us. And even in speaking in that and going a little bit further, I will be interested in how we're focusing on the holistic approach and the mental health and social and emotional wellness, how that is embedded within our policies and procedures as well.
Mr. Lindy, sound like a good use of time to you?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so students, admin, the audit, for lack of a better term, the superintendent and her team did on policies and procedures where they match or don't, and then this conflict of interest piece as well. And so we can put that on paper and then vote on it at our next meeting if that works for everybody. And so Ms. Davis, so for the next meeting already, we have Committee 2024 work plan that can go on the agenda. I'd like to pull out the conflict of interest, if we may, simply because it seems super relevant right now at the beginning of the year, and we've already been talking about it. So if Mr. Hoying can give us like a background on what that has been in the past, et cetera, be good for the next meeting. And then, yeah, vote on the work plan. And then I'll turn it over, as always, to General Counsel's office to bring us the first little batch of, from the students or admin category, that you think we could get through, a few of them.
Great.
Cool. Excellent, everybody. And so number 4, very, very interesting. And it's always nice when the public does show up. Mr. Heckman, of course, you notice has a badge, so he's Public Plus. Not that there's different. Plus doesn't mean better, but he is Public Plus. Mr. Heckman and some students at Walnut Hills have brought us this renewable energy and climate change resolution and commitment to electrification. Those who have been on the board for a while, which is getting weird to say because it's only one other person now, and I feel old. But this has come up a few times, and something like this, and you know, to be frank, which I tend to be, hasn't really gone anywhere. And so it was great when the group of students brought this to us, and folks may recall, and I know Ms. Mapp knows this, but for everyone's edification, when the students came and when we looked at this resolution, it was asked that we put this into policy committee, that general counsel's office come back with some notes, which Ms. Scott has already provided. Thank you, Ms. Scott. And so I'm going to turn it over to y'all to just kind of walk through the ask of general counsel to remind people, or for folks for the first time hearing it, was, can we do the things that are in here? Is there ways we could improve it? I think there was consensus on the board, though, that it's something we wanted to try to commit to at the very least. So,
Yeah, and I'll turn it over to Chris Burkhardt, the Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Burkhardt.
Yes.
Thank you. There's a lot in the resolution. We've kind of, and I just handed out a kind of a first draft of a response of where we're at in relation to a lot of the asks within the resolution. Overall, I think operations fully support the resolution with some minor caveats, so I can go through those. I'll just give you kind of an overview right now, and then open up for questions. We've been doing a lot of this work for quite some time. As we look at our electric rates and making sure that we're getting the most comprehensive, lowest electric rates as possible, while also making sure that's renewable energy, from controls and commissioning of our HVAC equipment, looking at green space and outside classrooms, as well as LED lighting. These have been initiatives that the district has taken on in the past that we continue to strive forward in making these initiatives reality in all of the four corners of our district. We also have been and continue to be in discussion with the city, because this doesn't happen in a vacuum. So even outside of our school communities, how we partner with the city is very important. To be honest, they have about a 10-month head start on a formal process. Their 2023 Green Initiative Plan was released last year, and so we are looking at that comprehensively, as well as how that affects our district and what kind of overlap and what kind of partnerships we have together. And we actually had a meeting yesterday in relation to solar and the RFP that the city is putting out in relation to solar and how CPS can be part of that. I'll go through the audit, and I'll put it into kind of 5 or 6 buckets of what we looked at versus the resolution. One is the audit of looking at district-wide energy audit. And so we've done some audits in silos throughout the district, but we haven't had a comprehensive audit. The reason being is that would cost us anywhere from $1.4 to $3.8 million. I don't think that we're in the space yet to be able to do that until we kind of put some of our infrastructure in place and look at what we want to do across the entire district. Again, a lot of this work has been done in silos, but we don't have one comprehensive plan for that. I'll also take a step back and say currently we have a request for information out on the CPS website where we're asking the community to help us tell us where those partnerships are. And I know partnerships are very important in relation to this. And when I say partnerships, partnerships can be everything from a local Boy Scout troop that wants to plant trees on our campuses to corporations that do works, especially around green energy, and everyone in between. So how can we have partners help us in this work? After we get responses back from this RFI, it's going to be open-ended, so we're not going to have a closing date. We're going to start evaluating those and see where we have partners in specific areas that are experts in this realm that can help us move the needle quicker than us taking that on all of ourselves. As we look at renewable energy and obviously our electric providers, We actually went out for electric renewal this past year, and that was a 4-year renewal on electric. We did look at the ability to go to 100% renewable, sustainable energy within that contract, but that would be an additional cost of somewhere just shy of $300,000 a year per year of that 4-year contract. So this year we did not decide to go with that option, but that doesn't stop us from multiple years within this to change. We were looking at the fiscal responsibility of the district and where we were at in that time frame, and we thought that that would be something that doesn't shut the door on future years, but in the point in time when we were making the decision, we opted to go with the less expensive rates. Solar is another area of topic that comes up. We are fully support of solar, and as I alluded to earlier, the city is going to be putting out an RFP for solar. Currently, we are doing a roof and grain assessment for solar. So in the past, we, with the 5-year facility plan, we looked at roofs and conditions of roofs. In that assessment, we didn't look at the ability to put solar on roofs. So we're going back through that work that we've done previously and trying to decide which campuses, which schools might lend itself to having a better solar footprint than others. As everyone knows throughout our district, we don't have a lot of completely flat roofs. So we really have to look at, the actual square footage space in each one of those areas to see if that is actually a match, a win-win on both sides, where we can put solar, it's angled in the right direction with the way the school building is set up, as well as the roof is going to allow us to do that. I will say at the beginning of this past school year, we had 26 active roof leaks out of 66 of our buildings. So we do know that a third of our buildings are not right for solar at this point in time. We're hoping that over the next 3 to 5 years that we can get to a point where that can be sustainable across the board. We certainly don't want to put solar panels on roofs that either have an active leak or are in need of roof replacement anywhere within the next decade. That's just money that would not be well spent through the process. From an appliance standpoint, going to all electric appliances is something that we're committed to and have started, and will continue to operate in that direction whenever feasible. In some cases, that is easier now and may be challenging for some schools that may be pushed off a couple of years. And I'll give you some examples. When the facility master plan was put in place, natural gas was cheap. And so we put a lot of natural gas in some of our buildings, and now we are having to convert and put in additional electric, whether that's electric infrastructure, grids, transformers, actually running lines through schools to be able to get to the point where we can transition those. And so in some of our schools where we, a decade or 2 decades ago, we're all in with natural gas, we're having to feel those effects of transferring to electric. And so that's not an easy switch where we just say, okay, well, install this appliance and the electric's going to be there. In some cases, we might have to bring in new service. And in some cases, we've worked with Duke to add that service to those schools. So across the board, we're committed to changing the appliances. Combustion engines, I think 2 things with combustion engines. I'm not sure that the technology is 100% there for a complete switch right now. We are looking at, I'll talk in terms of landscaping. When you're talking about electric mowers and trimmers and leaf blowers and the like, we are almost there from a technology standpoint. It is our endeavor to get to a point where our mowing is done from autonomous electric mowers. So think of a Roomba, if you will, and how that just goes out, does its thing, comes back, redocks itself, recharges itself, and then goes back out when it's charged. That would be the ultimate end goal from a landscape point of view. But the technology is not there yet. We've been in talks with some other colleges, universities. We don't know of any other school districts who have taken on this endeavor yet. So the technology is really too new for commercial application of this, but I am 100% sure that in the next couple of years or even sooner, that we will get to a point where we can test and get to a point where that becomes our standard operating practice. In relation to vehicles, obviously passenger cars and those vehicles in the district that are not heavy duty could be changed over. There are, with the IRA, there are incentives, $7,500 per vehicle to move to electric fleet. From a truck and van standpoint, and then I'll talk about transportation in another realm. Right now, the technology is not there for heavy duty trucks to heavy duty vans that a lot of our maintenance and trades folks use. The technology is just not there for those vehicles. As it becomes available, I think it will be there relatively soon. We've seen great strides in electric vehicles lately, and so we look at those areas and saying we're 100% confident that we're going in that direction. But in a lot of these cases, we don't want to be the earlier adopters, because early adopters come at a significant price and a significant low technology. And I'll use the analogies of, some of us in the room are old enough to remember VCRs and DVD players and flat screen TVs when they came out. They were very, very expensive, and the technology wasn't very good. Fast forward, 5 years later, everyone had one, and they were commonplace to almost every household. So we're looking at not being that early adopter, but we do want to get in on the early years of getting this changed, because we know it's the right thing to do. So we're kind of balancing the cost and the effectiveness of the transition and being good stewards of that money, while also not being that early adopter and not having those growing pains that should happen in the private sector. Transportation, good news. We have 10 electric buses that we just received a grant for in combination with First Student. So from a transportation standpoint, we've now dipped our toe into the electrified bus realm. As we look at our fleet and our needs for our fleet moving forward, obviously our district redesign and a lot of the ad hoc discussions will actually dictate to us whether or not is more economical and more to the district's operational standards to go more with the vans than buses, or what size bus do we go with, and what does that look like. So we're committed to going down that path, but I think there's a few unknowns right now that we're still navigating through to make sure that we are, again, looking at what is right for the district in the long term, not just what is the right for the district today. And we want to make sure that all of these investments that we're putting in place are good for the next decade or 2 decades, not necessarily just for today. Finally, from an HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning standpoint, we've been in process of converting those to electric and sustainability whenever possible. There's a lot of new technology out from chillers and heaters in relation to HVAC, and that is something, again, as I talk about early adopters, there's a lot of companies coming out with new solutions. We want to see those tried and tested first before we start to sink, millions of dollars into that technology. But I'm very, very hopeful that probably within the next couple of years that we will start to see that technology in our buildings and start to be more efficient with that technology. So I know I've said a lot. I've monopolized a lot of the time here, but happy to answer any questions or go deeper dive on any of the things I've talked through.
Mr. Burker, I'll just say real quick, this is the most comprehensive information I've ever seen regarding this. So thank you. And I feel like you delivered it in a pretty short period of time too. So thank you. I didn't think that it took. It's impressive. Thank you. Kind of keeping with the theme, I think, of this administration, All right. Well, we'll go in a minute. On Saturday we got a lot of great information too, and this just sort of keeps right in line with that. So thank you so much. Anyway, as always, Ms. Mapp, I always defer to my colleagues first before I say anything. So I'll turn it to you and then Mr. Lindy, if that works.
Perfect. I do have a few questions. Thank you for giving detail to this comprehensive plan and what's supported and what may not be supported based on just where we are as a district. You spoke about the 10 electric buses that we received. I'm curious to know what grant was that funded under, and also have we decided upon how we're going to begin to use those electric buses?
Yes, so thank you, and we're really excited. The electric buses aren't here yet. It's going to be 18 to 24 months before we actually see them in the district, and that gives us time to set up the infrastructure to be able to charge the buses. And so it's a partnership with First Student. The grant actually came from the Transportation Administration. Did not come from the IRA in this instance. However, there is monies from the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, to be able to purchase vehicles. So there's kind of a tandem. There's multiple areas to be able to bring that in. So we don't know yet how we're going to deploy those. Again, this is, I think, a couple weeks old, so we're still wrangling through what that might look like. Again, we're 18 to 24 months away from it. However, I would say that again, with the electric bus technology, it is still very new. We're still one of the first districts in the country to begin to electrify our fleet. We do know there's some caveats. So we had some cold weather a couple of weeks ago, and we do know that battery life on those electric vehicles could be diminished by up to 30 to 40% during those cold days. So we have to start really looking at how we deploy those buses, in situations in which we can sustain them all year long, not only when it's warm, but also when it's cold, and what type of mileage and how often they have to be charged, and whether they're a 1-tier, a 2-tier, or a 3-tier bus, meaning how many times it goes out to pick up students and deliver them to campus. So again, this is really new for all of us, across the country, especially school districts. So we're really excited, but we're a little cautiously optimistic on what that's going to look like. Hopefully that answered your question.
Absolutely. I think it's really commendable that we are one of the first to have this level of technology and work towards efficiency and sustainability. So kudos to the district and you all for working on this. I also appreciate the intentionality around not being ready to move in haste just because we do have this, but being very mindful about doing the research, understanding what will be best practices and what will be most advantageous before deploying that. So I thank you for sharing that feedback. The other thing that I wanted to ask was pertaining to the IRA. Have we already begun the process of applying for grants under the IRA? And also the second part of that, have we connected with surrounding districts? I know that like in Kentucky or Indiana, there's been a lot of districts that have also applied and have begun the process of implementing things that will help with sustainability.
Yeah, so to answer the first part of the question, we have not applied for any IRA grants yet. We are still navigating through that process. Again, that is very new as well. So although the IRA infrastructure grant came out a little while ago, it was just opened up to nonprofits and school districts, and don't quote me on this, I think a couple of months ago. So this is new for us, that I guess a new funding source for us. Again, it's looking that like if we fund a project, we could get 30 up to 40% of that revenue back. In relation to solar, we would then also receive that money back from the whatever we transfer back to electric grid and or the savings from our electricity. So long term, 20 years out, it could be cost neutral, but there is an upfront cost to that. The second part of your question in relation to whether or not we're working with other entities, we are working with the city, and we constantly have discussions with the city. There's a business manager group that is the Greater Cincinnati, a group of business managers and chief operating officers Most districts in that realm have not gone into solar and some of these endeavors like we are now. They don't have a lot of the resources that we have, but that doesn't mean they're not doing it. So some of them are doing it on a smaller scale than we would be looking at. But within that, we are also looking at co-ops, both local co-ops and co-ops across the country. For example, just from a vehicle standpoint, what co-ops have and what we can piggyback on, and the purchasing power of districts from all across the country, and what vehicles they have within those co-ops and what they have found to be sustainable for their operation. Because what works maybe in the private sector from an electric vehicle or electric lawnmower or electric LED lighting might not work in a school district, and we tend to be very hard on our equipment and utilize it to the end of its life, and so we have to make sure that investment is good. But we are doing those things that you asked.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
You good, Ms. Mapp? Good. Mr. Lindy?
Thanks, Mr. Morosky. I don't think I have any questions for Mr. Burkhardt, but just want to say thank you for his analysis and hard work.
Yeah, this is a very in-depth analysis. You took a couple of my questions, particularly about the IRA. I liked the nice mic drop of the electric buses. I didn't know when we were going to drop that information. I knew about that, and I was wondering when we were going to tell people about it. All right, good job, Mr. Burkhardt. Yeah, yes, surprise. Anyway, so one thing, and I always feel the need to say this, and I'm not saying anybody's even hinting this. Whenever I hear about electrified robot things, I always feel the need to say, particularly as policy chair, again, thank you, that I don't want to replace a human being. I definitely don't want to replace a human being mowing a lawn. But anyway, that is really exciting, though.
And nor do we. And to that point, we still have a lot of trimming and a lot of other work that needs to be done. From a landscape standpoint, it's looking at how do we get our campuses to the next level. Yep. And I think that helps us get there. So I want to echo your sentiment as well.
Thank you. And we'll need someone to take care of those robots, at least for the time being. We'll see.
Well, with you bringing up that point, I thank you. And then since we do know that we have representation from our union president, have you all connected, or are you considering connecting with our labor unions to make sure that there's that well-balanced perspective on how to move forward?
Yeah, right now, as you see in these documents and in our discussion, we're really right now in the phase of gathering information, looking at best practices. How do we implement this long term? Obviously, when we start to make decisions based on this, we'll actually bring everyone into the fold on that. Right now, we're really in the phase of, can we implement the technology that is currently out there? And as we look at, just for example, and you brought up lawnmowers, as we look at lawnmowers, the technology is not there yet. So these conversations truly are probably a year or two off, and we don't want to get ahead of it as well. So again, I don't want to say that we're having the conversation, but I also don't want to say we're not having the conversation for a specific reason. We're still doing research.
I appreciate you being transparent about that. And, when the time comes in 5, 10, who knows how many years, items like that would, I assume, be part of some kind of CBA or negotiating anyway. So I appreciate you being transparent about it. So the next thing I would say is, we don't do we have a little hearing of the public at the end of these things, but we do have an expert here, and I would be remiss if I didn't at least invite the expert to say a thing or two. And we clearly have an expert in-house too for the first time, and I don't feel bad saying that. I really appreciate you being able to give real answers to these questions. It's not something I'm used to, but I do. For a moment, Mr. Hetman, if you don't mind, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you do know more about this than any of us. Sorry, Ms. Mapp and Mr. Lindy. Do you have any reaction that would be helpful for me?
Helpful in regard to
just any any responses, any reactions, because the goal, what we would like to do, and it probably won't happen today, what we would like to do is get a resolution that is, it's a reach and gives us something to aspire to. It's also realistic, to your point. Some of these things we just, and I appreciate you being upfront about it. And again, I don't think if anybody watched even 10 seconds of our meeting on Saturday, we're not in a position to drop an extra $1.4 million on much anything, at least right now. But encouragingly enough, some of these buildings, some of this stuff's been done, the roof, et cetera. So just what we would like to do in this committee, I think, and what the board tasked us with doing, all right, we'll go do that in 1 second, is getting this resolution to a place where we can accept it, pass it on to the board. So just any commentary.
Okay. How long do I have? Normally it's 2 minutes, but
no, this is not part of that. Let's say
wow.
till like 9:50, and Miss Mapp is the chair for now.
and I don't want to dominate anything, or I am very pleased with the comprehensive approach, or looking at all of the different things that are in the resolution. It's a lot. So I'll give a little bit about myself. I am a father of 2 students. I have been active. I founded the local chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, which is a national, nonpartisan nonprofit. And we've been focused for, let's see, this was 2012 when we started, and the group was started before that. We've been focused on trying to get a national revenue neutral carbon fee and dividend policy in place. And Congress just has not been in position to take that step. Had they been in position, this would all be redundancy, right? Your main focus is trying to be a steward of dollars, public dollars, and we want the bad energy to be the most expensive and on its way out. Unfortunately, we're not there yet, and so I appreciate, in things like the power purchase agreement, you have concerns about cost. So climate change has been my top political voting priority for the last 20 years. I've been looking at it for a long time, the reports, how my kids, what kind of world they're going to live in. We are in a steep acceleration of using fossil fuels, despite the news that you may have heard, where we just had 195 countries come together for what's known as the Conference of Parties. And I share this because I was sharing it with the Walnut Hills students, all of the 20 articles that the Inquirer covered regarding this. And it was the first year out of 28 years where they could even use the words fossil fuels in the agreement, right? Name the problem. And that's part of this. That's why we're talking about electric. Right now, all of the solutions produce electric energy. And me personally, we've built an all-electric house. We renovated an 1870 building in Over the Rhine. We have solar panels covering the back half of our house. And despite being 36 solar panels, it's half of the energy that our house uses. Your guys' roofs are much larger. And so, if there is a willingness to look into, what rooftops are available to put, and to have some examples of, what potential offset you could have with solar panels, either on roofs, ground mount solar is another possibility. You guys own a lot of land. Parking lots. I've looked at every property that you have on Google Earth, and there's a lot of potential in every, lighthouse is kind of small. And there are potential partnerships that can, like the city had put a request for proposal with a group that up front did the money for this solar field that's out in Brown County, and they are buying the electric energy that's going to be produced from that, and agreeing to do that for 25 or 30 years is, you know, the payback for that company fronting the cost. So there are partnerships that are possible. The IRA money, the incentives are only going to be available until 2032. So politics, what they are, I hope. I mean, so pardon James, I hope that the political will comes around to, and I have so many emotions around this, for people to see what we see as costs today are literally life or death for our students, our youngest students. And one of the things that I would like for, well, one of the things we're working with the Walnut Hills students is they're putting together an online petition in support of this resolution. And the one thing that's not on here is a timeline. If I feel that a organization that is beholden, or not beholden, the right word, that is trying to do the right things for students and not undermining their future, that is trying to get them on the brightest path forward, should take up the lead on this issue and provide you know, a clear demand for companies to innovate towards, and for students to grab a hold of and say, yes, thank God somebody is doing something. You guys, I realize that the efficiency efforts that have been underway are really commendable, but using a little bit of something that's terrible is still bad. And natural gas, the one of the studies that came out last year showed that even 0.2%, if 0.2% of natural gas is emitted into the air via leaks, it's as bad as burning coal. And that's, you know, the science is catching up with this stuff. So I have lots of notes, and I can share them in an email, and I'm sorry that I can't, I don't want to continue to dominate this, but I will say this last thing. When we were preparing our speeches in the Climate Club, one of the students was told me that her comments were trying to convey desperation. I asked her to try and translate that to ask you guys to be bold on their behalf. And I think that the big danger is that we don't do enough. So I really appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Heckman, for what is one of the more compelling asks and speeches we've had in this committee, at least in the past 5 years. And as you know, because I've known you for a long time, well before I was on this board, I go out of my way to find people who are experts in areas when I realize I'm not, and I may know a little bit about a couple things, but I don't know much about this stuff. One thing I do know is that I want the planet to stick around, and one thing I do know is that we are destroying it. And one thing I also know as a former teacher and assistant principal is that when we invest in these things too, academic achievement goes up, discipline infractions go down, schools with just LED light, not just, but it is significant, but you know, just that increases, you know, learning. The other thing I know is that our administration is committed to being bold, and I appreciate a couple things. One, your work with rallying students around this cause and getting teenagers to push for something. And then two, coming today to speak on their behalf since they can't be here because they're in school, unlike my son, who I took out of school to come here. Anyway, So thank you for that. And I guess my only ask would be is if we could, and I don't know what this looks like, so I'm going to need help from the other experts. That's why I love this job. When at its best, yeah, from the beginning, at its best, this elected position, enables you to bring experts and experts together to do things for them. And I feel like this could be an opportunity. But I'm going to look for some help from y'all real quick, and then get reactions from Mr. Lindy, Ms. Mapp, and then we are going to have to move on. And that was impressive, by the way, that you did that in 8 minutes. Would the best thing be, absolute question, not a setup, so tell me what the best is, for General Counsel and Mr. Burkhart's offices to get together and figure out what a resolution could potentially look like that we could then, as policy committee, recommend to the board for adoption? Is that seem like the best thing? Okay, because if it's not, please tell me. I don't want to tell you how to. Okay, cool.
And I think bring it back to policy next month so that, for example,
which will be in just a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So this will be a quickest turnaround.
Right.
All told.
Right.
Yeah.
We can do that.
And then the one thing I had written on here was timeline too, and timelines are so strange in big, massive bureaucracies. And again, I can't overstate it enough. I appreciate the urgency the young people and Mr. Hetman bring to us. So thank you for that reminder. But last, I do want to give Mr. Lindy a chance to respond if he would like. You certainly don't need to, Ben, to anything Mr. Heckman said or what I just suggested about the resolution. And then
Mr. Moravsky, I think that the direction that you're proposing sounds great. And I'm grateful for the presentation. And I hope, to a fault, I'm a bit of an optimist by nature. And the thing I'm hopeful for this morning is that we can find some sweet spot that is at the nexus of what we can genuinely do in our current landscape that would make a genuine difference. I don't know exactly where that point's going to be, but I'm hoping we can find that point and then recommend it to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. I share the same sentiments. Ms. Mapp, anything in closing?
Yeah, so I do support the recommendation for both, parties to work together and bring this back to policy in February. And I really just want to say to Mr. Heckman, thank you for your presentation and for your vulnerability and what you communicated. And it really resonates with me. Particularly, I have been experiencing some challenges personally with my own child who has been exhibiting upper respiratory issues pertaining to the poor air quality. So I do think that this is something that we need to try to look towards some type of resolve. And we know that progress happens over time, but I'm hopeful, I believe we're all hopeful that we are able to begin to make strides in this.
Great. Thank you all very much. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'm going to do it. I don't care. Those who know me know I do it anyway. Mr. Burkhardt, thanks for bringing this. This gave us something to look at, which is great. Thank you. All right, so next, renaming Lighthouse for the 700th time, and that's a dig on myself. As I brought this up and then it goes somewhere in it. So have we gotten anywhere with this, or there's no update, is there?
There's not, and let me say what I think we need next is so the board policy that relates to renaming a school or naming a school was included in your packet, and the main thrust of that is it's the board's decision. So the board has the final say over naming school buildings. I think the question Mark Sherwood from Communications asked me to just say, his department can do some community engagement. They can hold back. They can, I think it depends on whether there's a name the board would like to see attached to Lighthouse, and then they would run with that, or if this is really just the Lighthouse community coming back to the board with some names. You know what I mean? What is it you're asking for in terms of?
I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you look at? What's the in A Nightmare Before Christmas, the mayor says, I'm just an elected official. I can't make decisions on my own.
I mean, there was at least one board member who I think had proposed a name, and certainly the communications department could roll with that.
Well,
or are we yeah, go ahead.
No, you're right. No, you're right. I'm being somewhat silly. Because we've asked we were going to do this, and then we were going to hold community engagement at Bramble, and then Bramble took priority, and then this took a back seat. And I'm going to look to Mr. Lindy and Ms. Mapp for some help with this. There have been 2 names that have gotten kicked back and forth, and they're the only 2 names, which is Dr. Odell Owens, Harriet Beecher Stowe. And those are the names. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Lindy and Ms. Mapp. I am not married to anything. I will not die on any of these hills, but I would suggest that this committee take those options back. We chat about it with the board. If they decide that they want Mr. Sherwood to do some robust community engagement, that's great too. But before we do that, I want to see, we'll start with Ms. Mapp this time and then go to Mr. Lindy. Just reactions to that. Ms. Mapp, again, the history with, so sorry, real quick. So Lighthouse was a charter school. Lighthouse, their new CEO, Paul Hafner, when he was new 3-4 years ago, got a hold of us, said, we don't want to be in the business operating a charter school. We sponsored it. Do you want the building? Do you want the school? And we said, sure, this is a really important place. So we took it on and made it a full-on public school for the kids in foster care, kids with a lot of severe behavioral issues, and it's a really special spot, as you know. In that agreement, it was just decided that we would rename it and not keep the name Lighthouse, just so it wasn't confusing for donors, for Lighthouse, etc. A couple years ago, Paul Hafner got a hold of me. He's like, hey, y'all going to rename that? And it was no beef. Nobody cares. No one's like, why haven't you renamed the school? But in the agreement, it did say that we would rename it. And it's like 3-4 years now, and we haven't. So that's why we're even talking about it. Sorry. So then reactions to offering Stowe or Owens or robust. Are you married to one or the other, or let the board talk about it?
I think for me, with being with just being introduced to it, I would like to just maybe have further reflection for my own personal thoughts to see what resonates the most, and also have board discussion around it. Just because it's an introduction for me, but yeah, that's pretty much where I am.
Thank you, Ms. Mapp. Mr. Lindy, any comments? And Mr. Lindy's taking a sick break. That is okay. Look, I've been there. Feel free to interrupt at any point if you want, Mr. Lindy. Otherwise, we're going to kick it back to the board to say, here are your 2 options. Or your 3rd option is Mr. Sherwood gets out in the community.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine, Mike.
Okay. Thank you.
I will also say,
I apologize. I have to jump here at the hour, but thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing everybody next time.
Yeah, man. Get well.
I do think that whatever we do, it's always important to have community engagement as well, so that they are able to give their feedback also. But I don't know what needs to take place first, but I think all of them are necessary if that's, if that's valid.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And another point of privilege, my second one today, and then I'll be done. I think the funnest fact I know is that Jenny Hayes, the first African-American principal, I think in the state, African-American female principal in the state, who my son's school is named after, was the principal of Harriet Beecher Stowe School, which no longer exists. All right, one more thing, I promise. He's like, you've been telling me this whole meeting you're going to go to Target. If you hold it together a little longer, and then we'll go to Lego, just a little bit longer. But this one's important for your friends who do not identify as a boy or girl, James. So House Bill 68, we're unaware. Hey, James. For those who are unaware, House Bill 68 does a number of hateful things, namely banning gender-affirming care, but it also has a number of pretty hurtful other items in it, such as boys who identify as a girl can't play girls' sports. This affects a handful of students in the state, and our state is run by adults who actually spend millions of taxpayer dollars to waste time so that they can prevent a handful of kids from playing sports, which is sick and twisted, and I believe that they all need to be committed or at least seek some sort of help. That being said, the governor vetoed House Bill 68, which was a pretty cheap gesture on his part because he knew he could do it and the legislature would turn it back over. So I refuse to give any kudos to him on that matter because his people ended up getting their way. And by his people, I mean the Republicans who run this state. So the legislature did just that, overturned it and passed this hateful legislation. And it is, I'm a guy and I can't break the law. I know, Mr. Hoying, it's not something I can. Well, I can, I guess, but I don't want the district to break the law. I can break the law, but I'm an elected person and I can't do that. I don't want to hurt the district. I know I shouldn't do that. Aside from a resolution that says we don't like this, which seems pretty lame to me, to be perfectly honest, we'll do it. And I'm fine with doing just token gestures to say we think you all are hateful people and we don't like this. Is there any recourse for us? I know the email I sent said something to the effect of, I have no intention of following this law. Public records request, there, I did it for you. I only say what I mean, Inquirer. So no secrets here. Is there a way around this? Like, what is this? Like, do we just ignore it? Is it too late now? I don't know.
I mean, two parts to the law, I would say. In our sort of initial look at it from our side, there's two parts. One is relating to, it broadly defines mental health professionals to include some of the folks that are employed by CPS, like school psychologists, social workers, counselors, and then it says, may not provide, quote, diagnosis or treatment of gender-related conditions without parental permission. I will say, I don't know what people think about what school psychologists and counselors and school social workers do, but they don't do a tremendous amount of, quote, diagnosis and treatment. Now, I would say our mental health partners that are co-located in the school, they're entirely in a different position with respect to some of this, and they're going to have to think through how they're going to be, because the thing I worry about in terms of just not following it is whether these professionals' licenses might be at issue as well. So that's something they're going to have to think through. I don't think in schools we're doing a lot of diagnosis or treatment in terms of our professionals. So that's on the first piece. Glad to answer questions about that. On the sports piece, kind of maybe even more interesting, because at the same time that House Bill 68 says there'll be a categorical essential ban of transgender female students participating in girls sports, Title IX, the draft regs there, which have not been issued yet but are expected, would say that states cannot make a categorical ban on. So then you have sort of a conflict of law issue between federal and state, and lots of fun for the Office of General Counsel to try to figure out. But that's sort of where we stand right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is a wonderful update. And is there any way, I know Dayton does have, they passed something, they kind of copied Akron's or Toledo's. Can we just copy theirs and present a resolution saying we think this is junk?
We can take a look at it, yeah. The other thing I should have started with is, just to be very clear, the district's policy on anti-discrimination is that we do not discriminate on the basis of gender, sex, gender identity, or expression. And that's been true since 2018, that we added those protected classifications. So I should have started with that, led with that board policy prohibits us from discriminating against those categories. Yeah, we can absolutely look at what the other districts are doing and put together a resolution.
Yeah, Dayton and Toledo's is pretty good. Okay. And again, I'm not trying to make light of resolutions that say we think it's a bad idea, but actions speak louder than words. Mm-hmm. And our actions have always spoken the loudest in the state. In my opinion, we've been ahead of most things. 2018 was my first year in policy committee when Ms. Bates was the chair. We were the first to add that stuff, anti-racism. Ms. Scott, thank you again for et cetera. But all right, Mr. Lindy's gone, so Ms. Mapp, any reactions?
You pretty much have inquired about the questions that I had for Mr. Hoying, and I think, again, at the basic level, affirming what our policies already state in terms of equity as well as anti-racism. And so just making sure that we are modeling that we want all of our students and our staff and our families to feel safe, to feel supported, and to feel valued and secured. So I don't know whatever direction that needs to take, right, making sure that does happen. And then I was interested in knowing about just the legalities, right? We know that legislation has passed. How do we make sure we honor what we have stated and in alignment with what the law is saying.
Great.
Thank you, Ms. Mapp. That's very, very well said. And so, just as a review, at our next meeting, we'll talk about the climate resolution again. We'll put this resolution on the agenda because, well, February 5th is our next meeting.
We can have it for you if you want.
You know, on the 5th, I won't be here, which is fine. I don't need to be there. I don't need to be there, but if I'd like to be there, maybe we could.
Yeah, we could do.
Yeah.
What's your preference? Bringing it back to here in February policy, or moving it forward as quickly as possible? It's up to
I'd
you.
say move that one forward. I don't think there's I don't need to be there. Miss Mapp can represent, co-chair Mapp. Wow, look at that. You got promoted already, your first meeting. Wow. Great. Cool.
Voluntold.
Voluntold. Yeah, that one, I think that one, let's just move it forward. And then at the policy meeting, the next agenda will have the renewable energy commitment to electric. And then the other things we talked about, the work plan we'll vote on with the items we discussed. We'll bring back whatever general counsel's office thinks we should look at with admin or students. And then I'll turn it over. I don't have any other business. My other business was running through all that. Ms. Mapp, do you have anything you'd like to add before we dismiss?
Oh, I think I'm good.
All right. And also, just to let you know, if you do, last year, Ms. Weinberg took us up on this a lot, and it resulted with quite a few new either amendments to policies or policies, I think. So if there is something that you would like to bring that you don't get on the agenda, feel free to bring it up in other business. And also, please know, and anyone who's been on this committee with me, which I think is now everybody except Mr. Craig, maybe. I don't know. But the way I like to do these agendas is whatever y'all want, okay? So if there's something coming up that you think is policy related, just, email me. We'll put it on the agenda. We will always be an hour and a half or less. That is my commitment to you, those two things. Yeah, no problem. And then if anybody wants to talk to us, raise your hand now. Does anyone out there want to talk to us? They do? Cool, you have 2 minutes. How many people we got? Just one? Great.
Andy, you have 2 minutes. You've been in. Can you accept the invite, and we will then get you started in speaking.
I think we're going to listen to.
Chair Morosky, there he is.
Hey, Mr. Holzhauser, welcome. I wonder what you
Good.
want to talk about.
Good morning. You've made my day, and I'm not just saying that. It's not pejorative. I share Chair Morosky's sentiment of joy of hearing as much of a comprehensive update on sustainability efforts as I've ever heard in my, many years of caring and following what I can with respect to what CPS is doing. And then to my neighbor and friend, Chris, who wakes up every day thinking about this and taking real action to get students and other parents and others who care involved. It's I don't know. I can't see the room. Chris, I don't know if anyone else is in that room, but, today alone, to the credit of the staff and the board members, I feel like progress is being made on this very real resolution. This is important stuff, and I'm here. I'm in year 5, I think, of an 18-year stint as a CPS parent. I have 3 kids that go to SCPA. I live in Over the Rhine, a few blocks from the school. This is deeply important to me, and I do have the fortune of working professionally in the clean energy space, working in buildings every day to increase their energy efficiency and renewable energy. There are a couple of things I just wanted to highlight as a follow-on. Number one, I come at the world from an accounting and finance perspective. I'm a CPA by training, so the ROI, the cost calculations, they got to be there, and I'm sensitive to any kind of budgetary constraint that is out there. At the same time, we never make progress meaningfully and transparently without first establishing that goal, that ambition, like we're talking about now, and then developing that energy baseline. It was alluded to that it might cost a couple $1 million for energy audits across buildings. Professionally, I would challenge that. We see it done a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different ways to slice and dice that, but it's a good place to start a conversation and recognize that if there's a will, there's a way. The zoo put up their multi-million-dollar solar system with basically no money, because if you ask Mark Fisher, he just never took no for an answer. And I think if we have the same passions and ambitions, and there are no question countless parents and others who care and want to make a difference, then we can make it happen. Councilman Jeffries wrote a really compelling op-ed that you all may have seen a few weeks ago challenging the city and CPS buildings to lead by example. The state of Ohio in October applied for $450 million of funds from the US EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund for solar predominantly, along with energy efficiency. They won't get every nickel, but they're going to get a really big chunk of that. And so that's just a very specific example of something we'll find out as a state in a couple months of new resources for us to say, now is the time to take action, set goals, establish baselines, do efficiency first, anywhere you can before putting on solar, but to take advantage of the many federal funds that are out there. Mr. Burkhart alluded to, I think, probably the federal tax incentive of starting at 30%, maybe more, that can now be monetized by nonprofits and government agencies. That's a game changer as well, but that is additive to a brand new public school energy efficiency grant program out of the Department of Energy. For example, that RFP is passed. It was several months ago. I hope that our school system can be ready for the next year's round of it coming up soon. And so those are just a few examples, but these federal funds that are coming down through the state, $400 million that was applied for, it's what's referred to sometimes as a green bank. It's really important, though, given the amount of emissions that come from the school's buildings, much less the transportation infrastructure, to lead by example. And so I'm excited at what we've heard today. I'm highly committed as a parent to do everything I can at SCPA and beyond to see real progress. And I'm very appreciative of everyone in this room and on this meeting that have had this dialogue. And I'm going to be telling the world about this today. It's exciting to hear that things are happening and that and that there's a resolution hopefully coming down the pike.
Hey, thanks so much, Mr. Holzhauser. We appreciate you. And I ended up taking a third point of privilege and letting another expert talk longer than 2 minutes. We're happy to have, again, both y'all here as parents and as activists, and can't be overstated enough that the work the administration put into bringing transparent, real information to us today, because without real information, we can't ask the right questions. Your job is to push us. Our job is to ask the right questions, and we can't do that if we don't get the information. So one last kudo to y'all. Thank you, Mr. Burkhart, Ms. Wright, administration, Mr. Council, Mr. Council, Mr. Council, and Mrs. Council. Let's hear it for Mr. and Mrs. Council, and the real leader, Ms. Crable, who's in charge of everything. But seriously, thank you all so much. Ms. Davis, appreciate y'all. Have a great day. Meeting is adjourned.